You speak and write about student choice as fundamental to their success as readers and writers. Why do you think it's so critical that kids choose their own books and writing topics?
This is a great question because, well, for many reasons, but yesterday it was a topic of conversation in my classroom. Again, students come to my school from all different situations, and so there are kids who are choosing their books and their writing topics for the first time, and kids who've done it since kindergarten, who have no other experience, and so they've behaved as writers and readers their whole lives. But the kids who come from other settings have such a different perspective. They spoke yesterday about writing and reading that mattered, and not in some nebulous someday, but that matters today, and that this is the first experience they've had of that because they chose. You know, they chose books that gave them pleasure. They developed pieces of writing that gave them satisfaction and allowed them to feel significant. I think everyone works hardest on the projects that we carve out for ourselves or that we take on because they're part of, for example, a professional world that we have decided we want to be engaged in. And I think that to ask kids to pursue exercises, a version of writing or a version of reading, postpones the sense and the pleasure that are intrinsic in those acts. I think when they choose what they'll write about, when they choose the books they'll read, they get to experience the authentic pleasures and challenges of those acts. And as writers, they get to have voices beyond the classroom, because it's not a class of 20 kids writing their own set of instructions for how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but rather writing a poem for their grandmother in California, a letter to the editor of the local paper, a poem for an instructor magazine poetry contest. They're having voices both within the classroom community as writers, as we share and publish writing there, but beyond it as well. They have a kind of power, and they also have a practical reason to become fluent, skillful writers as well. Again, it's not some someday version of the craft of writing. They're practicing it right now, and they're seeing the power they have to change the world, to change their own little lives, but also to make people beyond the classroom think because they're writing. My students produce probably 20 or 25 publishable pieces of writing across the genres every year. I would say 90% of it is just exceptionally good, substantive, interesting, rich, gorgeous writing. And I know that underneath all the lessons I teach about how to write well, underneath the time I give them to write well, underneath the conferences I have with them about their writing, the core condition there is that they chose the topics. They have ideas they care about, itches they want to scratch, as we say in my classroom, and they used writing to scratch them. And along the way, not only learned how to write well, but probably learned how to answer the most important question of all, which is, why would anyone want to do it? Well, here's why. Because of what I felt and what happened. Because I wrote poetry and essays and profiles and memoirs and short fiction, and figured out who I was, and figured out my relationship with the world, and figured out the world too. Writing makes kids smarter. Reading makes kids smarter. It also makes them happy. It also helps them think in ways they would never think if they didn't write and read. And the most powerful, highest quality writing and reading involve books kids have chosen and ideas that they've developed and want to pursue. It's a lot of work to write well. You're much more likely to engage in that work when you care so very deeply about what happens with the final product.